Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gregorian calendar year 2024. Thank you so much for joining us once again in the new year. It's so nice to have you back. We're happy to be back, and it's been a couple weeks. So it's like, we've had a bit of time to get excited again about the work that we do, which is always so important. And other than that, do we have I guess I should introduce myself as usual. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I'm the other of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. Lots of wonderful people here on the live, and if you're watching on the replay, we're happy to have you with us too. Do we have any announcements that we need to make?
Yes, we are still in our fund drive. So uh, if everybody would be so kind as to look under their couch cushions and in the center console of their car and collect up all of your spare change and send it to us, we would be ever so grateful.
Yes, and if you're wondering how to do that, we have a couple of ways to do that so far. You can do that through our PayPal or via our coffee profile. And
Yeah.
both of those are linked in the description.
Yeah, and we'll take bottle caps, soda bottles. I used to make my living collecting soda bottles when I was about 10 years old.
There you go.
Yeah,
California, you can make money off of wine bottles now, apparently,
yeah,
as of
go figure.
January 1st. So, whatever works for you works for us. And if any of those ways are not accessible to you, reach out and we'll see if we can work something out.
Yeah, we'll take
It's,
the quests and, old cars. That's always good.
we've had a little trouble with Wise, but we got it working, so that's an option too. Anyways,
Anyway,
thank you for the intention to support us in acting on that in any way that suits you is really meaningful for us because we're not making the big bucks doing this work, and yet it is our vocation. So it means a lot to have that support as we continue to do this work. All right. The usual YouTube spiel, of course, is to support us in those ways that are so familiar to us all: liking, commenting, and subscribing to our channel. All of those things really support us, at least in terms of the YouTube algorithm, which is how we get to reach you and reach other people who are like-minded. And that helps our community grow, and it helps us share the message of waking up so that we can all support each other in being ethical, well-rounded, arguably somewhat sane human beings, right? So we're working on it. Anything else, Mushtaq?
mm, not that did we include commenting?
Yes.
Yeah. Comment.
Yeah. Yep.
If you, we'll accept Canadian coin. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. All right, cool. So if you have
We'll
any other
take anything.
questions,
Yeah.
of course, you can send us an email, which is also available in a link mentioned in the description below. All right, so this evening we are responding to a topic request, and of course, you can always send those our way too, and we'll see what we can do. We're going to be talking about grace. Grace is something that comes up often, not only in the context of Sufism, but also in the context of the Gurdjieff work. And as most of you know, we are always kind of working with both of these things in a shared context. So it's important for us to cover what we mean when we use this word grace, because it tends to be kind of a vague word, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh, new person just joining us.
We'll let them get in here.
What?
So
Yeah,
we
we'll
will
let them get in here, yeah. Thanks for your patience. welcome, new person. I don't want to put you on the spot now that we are recording, but I just want to share with you that you are always welcome to engage. So if you want to type in the meeting chat or unmute yourself and share your thoughts, you're entirely welcome to do that when you have questions or things you might like to add to the conversation. So thank you for being here. All right, so let's get started, shall we?
All right.
Grace.
Grace, you actually had started.
Yeah. Yes. The importance of this term and understanding its meaning in the context in which we're using it. So, it's a tricky one because every tradition seems to have their own little, religious spin on this, but we're going to be taking it apart in terms of how it's used in ancient texts and see if we can tie that to what it means when we use it in these more modern senses today.
Yeah. And that will hopefully be somewhat clarifying. In the old Greek text, if you look at the Gospels and the epistles in the New Testament, the word that is usually translated as grace is charis in Greek, because those were, of course, all written in Greek. And the basic definition of it is graciousness, a manner of how you act, divine influence on the heart, and its reflection in life, and gratitude. I'm going to put a little thing in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw that in the chat too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from charis, grace, we get charismata, which is that's the Greek word for spiritual powers, which is interestingly the same concept as is found in Arabic. Different words, but exactly the same concept of charismatic gifts are gifts of the spirit, as opposed to supernatural gifts. And there's a distinction to be made there. Now, in Hebrew, the word is chen, which is favor, grace, charm, but also a moral quality of kindness. And of all of the ways that word can be translated into English, most frequently it's translated as grace. Now, the Arabic has several words that can be translated to English as grace as well, but the one that is, I think, most appropriate is fadl, which comes from the root fi dad lam. And we define that as unmerited favor from God. So it's not something that you've done, that you've earned, but something that is just given as a gift. Also, it has the connotations of helping someone, helping another person. Favor is another way that they translate this. And it also has a quality of service and kindness. So those are the roots from which we work. Osama, any more thoughts on that word in Arabic?
That's spot on. And also, I guess the only thing is how it's used in today in the common language. When we say تفضل, meaning like welcome. Also, it would loosely translate into that as well. So there's this,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I looked up every instance of the word I could find in Quran and then looked at how it was translated, and you get 6 different translations easily.
Mm.
So we've talked about this idea before of grace as it applies to the second conscious shock, to use Gurdjieffian terms.
So before we move forward into that realm of discussion, we do have a couple of thoughts I'd like to share that are related to these words that we brought up. So Ian asks, or says, I'm curious as to whether there is a relationship between grace and the idea of baraka.
As a matter of fact, there is a connection, though it is circuitous. Because baraka can be translated as blessing.
Yeah. Barak.
Yes.
Khalil offers that that can mean blessedness. Khalil says, in Arabic, the common word please is, yeah, my Arabic is terrible, thank you, meaning from out of your graciousness. Yeah, so obviously there are lots of, connections in significance that are being drawn upon here, and that's important to remember. All right, so moving forward into the realm of the second shock, Mushtaq, that you're talking about, the second conscious shock.
Yeah. Or the 6th shock on the Enneagram,
Mm-hmm.
if you all remember the quality of that.
Because we've talked about, just to kind of jog people's memory, because this is definitely worth going back to learn about if you don't remember, or learn about anew if you haven't touched on it yet. We've discussed how in the Enneagram process, the first conscious shock, the third point on the Enneagram, has to do with will and taking action. And the second conscious shock at the point 6 has to do with, as we're going to be talking about, grace, which, as we'll notice, is quite a bit different from what happens at the first conscious shock.
So the fundamental truth of grace is that there is nothing that you can do to get it. When we look at the first conscious shock, it is your own will that helps create that. But your will cannot get you grace. If we think about the Enneagram of the kitchen, right? The first shock is easy. The first shock is the food enters. And that's just a matter of these days picking up the phone and putting in your order for the food, and it comes and it is delivered to you. But the second conscious shock would be, in the Enneagram of the kitchen, the community enters. And there is no way that you can order the community to enter. You cannot command them. So
First of
think
all,
about that for a second. You're the chef, you've prepared the meal, and you say, hey, community, I have the meal. And they don't show up. What does that mean?
And if this metaphor, this imagery is completely unfamiliar to you, we've done a video on the Enneagram of the kitchen specifically as a way
We'll
to
put a link to it.
Yeah, I just wanted, if people are watching this video, I want them to know that that's a resource available to them.
Yeah.
So that will be linked to at least at the end of this video. And you can find that in our Enneagram playlist on our channel too. So as you were saying, Mushtaq, you
So
cannot,
here's a question
yeah.
for you. How do you get people to come to your house for dinner? Let's take a quick look at that. What can you do?
Invite them.
Yeah, invite them. That's a basic thing. But what can you do to invite them in such a way that they are likely to come?
Be a pleasant person.
What does that look like?
Being a good community member, being friendly, being hospitable, being pleasant, or making others desire to be in your presence, at least to a certain degree.
Your answer is fundamentally correct. In order to successfully invite people, invite the community, or invite a person, you have to create rapport with them. You have to treat them in such a way that they are happy to see you. So how do you do that with God?
Damn.
Yeah, because we assume that, I use the word God because it's an easy gloss for this. I don't care if you are an atheist or a Hindu, you can say gods. It makes no difference to me. That which is greater than yourself, or that which is part of your collective.
I
And
always like to add, the force, even
yeah,
if that
divorce.
works for you. Yeah.
But I like God. So what qualities do you need to have that God would be interested in coming close to you?
This is a little vague, but being open to God, possible.
That's actually a good answer, because if you aren't open, why would he show up, or she show up, or they show up?
Or you wouldn't notice if God did show up.
It's true. That's absolutely on point as far as I'm concerned, Nancy. How would you even know if you're not really paying attention, not open to that? Thank you. Hello.
Well, if Martin Buber is, oops, let me get my microphone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
If Martin Buber is to be believed, it has to do with the way that God reveals God's self together. So one would have to be extremely open to seeking God in the presence of the other. And I think in that way, if you are sort of self-emptying and lacking a lot of self-concern, probably God will reveal God's self to you in your willingness to love and open and serve the other.
Thank you, Hello.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like
even if
Martin
Buber
Buber.
said it, still sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I make fun of Buber because he was so grim sometimes, but
Oh.
he made a lot of really good points.
Mhm. Yeah.
I wonder if there really needs to be a seeking for God, because I know of atheists who've had grace, what I would describe from what they tell of their lives and how they are. But there's an openness, a neutrality, a curiosity, um, a presence of just accepting what is. So I don't know that that there needs to be a looking for God or an inviting God in.
Yeah, that's why I went through the whole thing of, you know, I call it God, you can call it anything.
Yeah, and
You're not wrong there.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think that's an important point, is that there is something that language makes it harder to get at if we talk about like seeking God and going out of our way to meet God, or, you know, however we want to frame that. But I hope over the course of this conversation, we'll be able to bring a little bit more,
yeah, it's
more of
to
that
talk
in.
about. So,
Yeah. Osama, did you have a thought before we continue?
Yes. I'm still thinking about the image of, or the question, what would I do to invite the community, and how that relates to the divine. For the community, one way to do it would be to cook the crowd favorite, right? Like if I'm in Jordan, I'm cooking mensa. If I'm in Texas, I'm doing, you know, Texas barbecue or whatnot. And how does that relate to the divine? And meaning in seeking or in doing something that's, or seeking pleasing the divine, right? Which is, I don't like that intention too much, right? It's kind of like this idea of just out of love, out of ashq, for that yearning for divine love. So how does that relate? This balance between doing something or seeking the divine out of pleasure, or pleasing, maybe not pleasure, but pleasing, doing something so that the divine is happy with you, so that, you know, you can receive that grace, and the nuance between that and just love or ashq to be the driving intention.
Mm.
So to understand this, we're going to have to go back to the beginning.
Hang in there, Naomi and James. I think it's important for us to move the conversation forward a little, but hold on to your thoughts.
So in the beginning, God created the world. Then he planted a garden. And in the midst of the garden, he put 2 trees. You may have heard this story before somewhere. And then he made humans. And he said, eat anything you want, except don't eat from that tree over there. And you know the story, the surface of the story, where somebody goes and they eat from that tree over there. And then God is all pissed off and he chases them out of the garden. And they have to do all of the human things from then. So anybody remember what that tree was supposed to be?
The knowledge of good and evil.
Yes, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what is the knowledge of good and evil?
Knowledge of the self, self-awareness.
It's more specific than that.
Duality?
That doesn't really mean much to me.
Go on.
What do you get when you understand good and evil?
Choice.
Free will.
Suffering.
Come on, this should be obvious. So you know the difference between good and evil. What does that say about you?
You have a conscience.
Yes, you have a conscience. I submit to you that this whole Garden of Eden thing was a setup from the beginning.
Scam.
Totally. God went over to the snake and said, hey, go talk that person into eating the fruit because it's time. We don't get to be human without a conscience. And we do not get the opportunity to call grace to us without a conscience. Now, what is a conscience specifically? Knowledge of what's good and what's evil. How do we know this? What is the key quality of conscience?
Well, it's acknowledging the other, the impact your actions have on other people. That's certainly part of it.
Yes, and this is going to circle back to what Khalil was talking about a little bit ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what do you call this understanding of the other?
Empathy.
Compassion.
Yes, empathy. Empathy is one of the two qualities of conscience. And what does that tell you if you are going to be putting yourself in a position where you are going to open yourself to receiving grace? We can take this back to the kitchen. What does any good cook have for the people for whom he cooks or she cooks? I say he because I love to cook, so I put myself in that position.
A sense of what they like.
A sense of what they like and a sense of how it will make them feel. So over the holidays, I took on the duties of cooking.
He made some lovely dishes, by the way.
Yeah, I made Christmas Eve. Was it Christmas Eve or
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day?
But
That's
in
right.
3
I
days
worked for
prior.
3 days on that meal.
Yeah, you were working pretty hard.
Yeah. And then I made a New Year's Eve meal. And for both of them, the thing that I focused on is the happiness of the people who were going to eat the food. Feeling for that, what it would take to make this in such a way that they would enjoy themselves and feel cared for by eating the food. And they showed up for dinner. Go figure. Of course, they'd have to go hungry if they didn't, but
I wasn't the only guest present, believe it or not. We had a lovely friend dining with us as well. And yeah, everyone came and we had a great time.
yeah. So the cook, the chef, has to have a sense of empathy and connection with the guests, with the community. He has to know what the community likes or know how they would respond to different dishes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so people seem to be following along. Yeah.
So, what does that mean if we are looking for grace? If we want to open ourselves to grace? Thoughts?
Try to discover what Allah likes.
Yeah. And how do you do that?
By embodying it.
Well, empathy with God.
By being a good guest.
Now, there is an excellent answer.
It's a very Sufi answer.
I was just thinking that you might actually need grace to even understand what's needed to get grace.
There is probably a lot of truth to that. So with grace, you have to be willing to receive it. That's your job. You have to open yourself to the possibility of receiving this grace. If you're the chef, you have to open yourself to the possibility of the community coming to your dining room. And this goes back to the idea of conscience. That interconnection you have with the other that allows you to perceive them as essence, as subject rather than object. It's what Buber called the I-thou relationship, for the philosophers amongst you.
Yeah, and I think that it doesn't have to be a religious thing to have that I-thou relationship. So for the
Actually, just the
atheists,
opposite. That's what makes it a religious thing.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, the language that we use for this thing is almost irrelevant. It really is an embodied thing. I mean, the language is irrelevant, quite frankly. Yusuf had a question real quick. Yusuf asked, is it about Ihsan?
And the answer
Ihsan?
would be yes. Ihsan is an Arabic word. Where are you, Osama?
Always putting Osama on the spot.
Well, it's only because Wael isn't here.
That's right. I do. Oh my God, I do miss Wael.
No.
It would come in clutch right now.
Yeah. I usually think of it as Ihsan is an action, and it's an action whose qualities are beautiful. But please make by definition better.
I cannot. I would agree with that 100%. Yeah, beautifying, a state of beauty, kind of.
Yeah.
That's how
But
I
it's a
understand
verb.
happiness.
It's not a noun. It's not something that you have. It's something that you do.
Yep, action. I agree.
Thanks, Osama, for allowing us to make you our walking, talking dictionary.
It's okay. I have no shame when it comes to getting the best words possible of whatever language we are looking at. That includes English.
Yeah.
My English ain't perfect.
Yep. And I appreciate everyone's help when they offer definitional support. Khalil often does that. Much appreciated. Yusuf from time to time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So when we say ihsan, how do we know that we're doing something beautiful? Again, this takes us back to the idea of empathy and conscience. You can make something that looks beautiful, but if the method by which you make it is not beautiful, the essential quality of the thing will not be beauty. We could argue that, but that's my take on it.
Did you have a thought, Nancy?
I've been trying to pull it together, but haven't. I mean, you know, physical grace would be, I don't know, coherence, respect for how things work, appropriate reaction. You're operating in time as well as space. I'm not sure how helpful this all is.
Well,
Yeah, I guess sensitivity to what's appropriate, so that you're paying attention to what you're doing.
Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome. I
Something for us
mean,
to
did this
think
help?
about. I think it's something to chew on. I think that there is a sense of fluidness involved. Like when we think of grace, we think of like a smoothness, like you said, coherence. And I do think there is something to that here when we're talking about even the metaphor of creating a welcoming environment and being a welcoming person.
Yeah, this is
James,
negative, but you're driven by sensitivity to your current situation rather than by a theory.
perhaps so. Something to chew on. Thanks, Nancy.
Welcome.
James.
I'm having real trouble with this one today. Could an aspect of this be devotion, praise, that's where the usual self-centered or self-interested motives have been stripped away, broken, disappointed, seen through, whatever, so that what's left is very much a passion for the real, for its own sake, without any compromise or hidden agenda? Or is that a totally different topic?
What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah, you're smart.
Um, I mean, I'm learning about this to some extent along with you guys, and something I want to share about what comes up for me in terms of grace, which may tie in what you've said, James, is that there are sayings in the Islamic tradition that I think it may even be in the Quran itself. And when again, we're using like God language, but I don't think that's necessary. That's just the vocabulary that's used in these texts. But, when we go walking towards God, God comes walking towards us. When we go running towards God, God comes running to us. And how I've always understood that is that we don't realize that God is always there, always seeking to connect, always present, always not even really that far away, not far away at all, but as it said, closer to us than our jugular vein. So there is really actually no need in a literal sense for God to run towards us at all. That presence is always there. But it is up to us to acknowledge that, as we've said, to be open to that, to be aware of that in order for that connection to become clear to us. So I think that this idea of like passion for the real can come into play in the sense that access in part, it may require that we passionately desire it. Does that make sense?
Oh, to me it does. But the assumption I'm running on is that if we have baser motives, that those little things actually block or occlude the grace that's always there. It's like an internal distraction where we're devoting ourselves for some conventional gain, and that motive obscures psychologically, psycho-spiritually, whatever, what's already going on in the ever-present grace.
Mm.
So part of what we can do is acknowledge and drop our sort of false motives, and
I
which
think
then
there's
would
something
hopefully
to
clear
that.
up our perception.
Yeah, I mean, Khalil mentioned earlier in the chat, you know, there's a lot you can do to block grace, and
Yes.
I think that that is sadly true. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's confusing because, as we've said from the beginning, you don't really earn it. It's gifted to you. And so that seems like a contradiction.
But you can
But
stop pushing it away,
yeah.
and you can find out the ways that you push it away and deal with them. And
Mm.
while grace would be some kind of additional factor, like your efforts there aren't going to be sufficient in and of itself, that if you're still really sort of wallowing in your own stuff, no matter how prettily you dress it up, you're still sabotaging. That's what the
Would
word I was
you?
trying to find, sabotage.
Yeah, okay, sabotage. I mean, like, can you even recognize it when you're in that state? The grace is coming at you at 375 miles an hour. I mean, often not, right?
Mm.
So then it just passes us by without us embracing it at all. So,
So,
yeah.
what can you do to invite grace to come near you?
Do you want to touch base with Yusuf, or would you like to
Yeah,
move
no,
forward?
let's do that.
He's been waiting so patiently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remembered a Sufi story. There was a dervish who was also a merchant selling grains or something like that, but who was also cheating on weight.
Ah,
For example, instead of one kilogram, 800 grams, for example. One day, his sheikh comes to his store, and of course, he didn't cheat at that time. He exactly weighed one kilogram grain, and his sheikh says, "Okay, from now on, you will assume that whoever comes from the store is me." So I think this also has something to do with that. So assuming that everyone or everything is God, so we act like that. Yeah, that was it.
Thank you, Yusuf.
There's a story that I vaguely remember about Bahodin that is somewhat similar to that. Somebody comes to him. I can't remember all of the details now, but Bahodin sends him away, and then he visits him in disguise a number of times. And of course, the guy doesn't recognize him and treats him badly. And then finally, Bahodin reveals that it's him and tells the guy, well, you should have treated me in disguise the same way that you treated me when you knew who I was.
So many fairy tales. about that kind of thing too. Thanks, Ian. So, Mushtaq.
Yeah,
Your
that's
topic.
actually, it's a perfect lead in to the question of how do we develop the space for grace in our life? One of which is you treat everybody as subject, not as object. And in these stories, we have this guy who recognizes the sheikh as subject, but not the rest of his customers. So we say he had his thumb on the scale. He's pushing down on the scale a little bit to make it heavier than it actually is.
So that he can fleece them a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best way I know of to make the space for grace in your life is to practice gratitude. If you remember back when we were looking at the Greek word, one of the connotations of charis is gratitude. And if you practice that, it makes the space for grace to enter. Gratitude is like it will enlarge the living room of your heart, for a weird metaphor.
I like it.
Yeah.
Keep the chairs comfy and the snacks plentiful.
Yeah. So how would you do that?
So Khalil offers just to build that relationship between terms. If Haristo in Greek means thank you, but literally it means good grace. Yeah. So there's, this idea of gratitude, thanksgiving, appreciation. For what is, generally speaking. Because you never know what's coming your way, so you got to be ready for offering that welcome at any given time. James.
Might be harping on about this a bit, I don't know, but gratitude, the attempt to be genuinely grateful for what is, would not doing that expose our resistances to what is? The very act of trying to assume a position of gratitude and a feeling of gratitude, wouldn't that sort of expose whatever parts you use grumbling about reality? Would that not be an effect?
Yeah. Thank you is when this is going to relate to what you're saying. And I'm thinking about various languages. So in Bahasa Indonesia, when you say thank you, you say terima kasih, which literally, if you take the two words, it means accept love. So think about that. If one way to say thank you in Tagalog is salamat, which comes from the Arabic salam, which means peace.
An offering of peace.
Yeah.
Wishing of peace.
I'm trying to remember the literal meaning of asante, which is Kiswahili for thank you. It'll come back to me probably 2 minutes after we're done talking.
So, I mean, this may be a can of worms, but, and you can pass the buck on this, so to speak, and we can refer back to talks we've done about, you know, when shitty things happen, and you don't need to be like, oh yay, shitty things have happened to me, great, come one, come all, right? Like, it's not that we are saying you need to be excited about everything that comes your way. That's not realistic and probably not even healthy. But in terms of grace, I think it's safe to say that in everything that comes our way, there is always a teaching, and that in itself can be an opportunity for receiving grace if we can acknowledge that and look for it. What do you think, Kushtak? Did you catch that?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, Khalil offers in Russian, spasibo means God may save you, that is, shed his grace upon you. Yeah, that's a pretty thoughtful sentiment too.
Yeah. What does everybody else think? I'm sitting here talking my head off.
Yeah, Osama, what do you think?
I think it's also safe to say that it's not just a, you know, movement of the tongue or the use of language. You know, to be thankful, that's also, you know, an action and a state. There's, you know, this openness internally for it. So it's not, you know, the way that I've learned it growing up is to say the word, right? Alhamdulillah, ashukru lillah, right? That's just to say the words, and that's how we practice gratitude. And maybe there's a place for that, but for, you know, if we're seeking something that, or a deeper relationship, you know, there's a internally there's this, which is funny. It's like language. I don't know how you know, how I would describe that. You know, this openness, this you know, content. There's this yeah. So it, and I don't know if that's an individual, subjective kind of relationship with source, with the divine, this state of gratitude, being in a constant state of gratitude. You know, and I'm trying to wrap my head around that and grace, fadl. And also, you know, when I got the email that we're going to be talking about grace, the other term that came to mind, this is the term that I've been really like going in, or the word, which is mercy, rahma.
Yes, because Rahman can be used as grace as well.
Yeah, so it's like, and it's always described as, you know, we bestowed you know, let's say Khidr with Rahma and knowledge. It's always something that's like, that's, I don't understand it yet. So I'm like, I'm trying to piece these terms, you know, Fadl, grace, Rahma, mercy, and Shukr, and thankfulness, and Alhamdu, glory, and all of that. Like, there's some kind of relationship between them that I'm trying to taste and see how, if they're different, if they're all pretty much talking about the same kind of thing. But I do recognize that it's not just the words, you know, I'm gonna say Alhamdulillah 100 or 1,000 times, or I'm gonna say Shukrulillah, or, you know, and maybe there's a place for that, but I know, or at least for me, there's a desire for something that's deeper than just the word itself as a practice. So that's where I'm at right now. These are kind of my thoughts, and this is, yeah, I'm loving this because there's a lot of questions, which leaves room for, you know, to meditate on. Like, okay, I'm gonna sit with that question for some time to meditate on.
I like
so thank
that.
you.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned the word mercy, which is another one that came up for me as well, which echoes that aspect of this that is like, you can't earn this. You don't check a whole bunch of boxes and then it's like, poof, here you go, kid. Grace is yours. Like, that's not what we're talking about. But I like that distinction between, I almost not regretted, but the word thankful, Thanksgiving does make me think of like the words. And I think there's something to be said about this being a state, you know, an abiding sense of gratitude rather than like, I make a checklist of all the things I want to say thank you, God, for. Like, that's not the essence of what we're meaning when we're saying gratitude is a big component in this. At least that's what I've understood from what Mushtaq and I have talked about and what we're unpacking in the group this evening. So thank you for speaking to that. This differentiation between this like tit for tat exchange and more of an abiding connection, an abiding welcomingness.
One of the things that sprang to my mind early on in what Osama was saying is that really it has to be very sincere and from the heart. It doesn't matter what you're saying. If you're not feeling it like that, it's meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah, and that ties back to what we discussed earlier about the I thou-ness, this sense of being in empathy, being in connectedness. Anybody else have thoughts they might like to share? I can always call on people.
Yeah, and you should probably do that, especially as
Yeah, we need to start wrapping up a little bit.
we need to
so-
start wrapping up. Just let me say first, before
Please.
we start wrapping up, that the practice of gratitude, which is not saying anything, but feeling something, engaging the heart in a sense of how cool it is that existence is here, right? It's like your life could be shit, and yet you listen to the birds sing and you feel grateful for that. You know, it's how you create your focus.
Yep.
So maybe this week you experiment with that and see how it works for you. And this is important because grace is what allows us to move through the second conscious shock, which is on the octave, it's the C-do interval. It's that last retardation of the vibrations that needs that extra push. And the push, you yourself alone do not have enough most of the time to get through that second conscious shock. So you
Yeah.
have to get a little bit of energy from outside of yourself. And this is where barakah and grace connect. Because the barakah, the blessing, is the energy to get through the difficult part of completing the octave.
Yep. Sometimes known as the dark night of the soul.
Yeah. Frequently known as the dark night of the soul, or God damn it, not this again.
Or why? When does it end? You know.
All those things.
I have a question about that. I
Sure.
thought I had heard you say in previous videos that the dark night of the soul happened at 0.5 in the Enneagram.
Yeah. And to get through it, you have to get through 0.6. You have to move through that, and that requires the grace.
Ah, okay.
It's like the resolution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Ian?
Oh, yeah, that's... When I think of the C-do interval, I mean, it's already past the 6 point. And in
It
fact,
depends on how you arrange the octave.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
yeah, I read I can't recall exactly who it was by right now. A few weeks ago, I read a very interesting, long article talking about why the shock was placed at 0.6 in the Enneagram, but in the octave it's at C-do, i.e. 0.89. And it included something that related back, I think, to something in Beelzebub's Tales, but it's several weeks ago and my memory is a little bit fuzzy on the details.
Yeah, feel free to send us a link if you happen to remember what it was.
I've got it in a bookmark. I'll have to dig it out.
All right, no
Yeah.
worries.
When it comes to that, there's about a half a dozen different ways I know of off the top of my head to arrange octaves on the Enneagram.
Ah,
All of them are correct.
Mm.
of
The
course.
one that we have been teaching since we started this is the easiest one to comprehend.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not the one true right and correct one. It's just one way to use the tool. And since the tool is the universal hieroglyphic for understanding all the secrets of the universe and understanding all knowledge, it's likely that there would be more than one way to use it.
Yeah, he's speaking of the Enneagram, so
Yeah.
make of that what y'all will. All right, shall I touch base with people?
Touch base with people.
Yeah, Brian, what's on your mind? What are you thinking?
I'm just kind of curious about any connections between grace and magnetic center.
Likely so, because it takes some grace to start developing what they call the magnetic center.
And on the Enneagram, where would the magnetic center fit?
The magnetic center is not a process. You can do the Enneagram of developing a magnetic
Yeah,
center,
that's what I would say.
but you can't put things on an Enneagram. exactly.
There's no like, this is point magnetic center. It's more
Yeah.
like, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, somebody's going to pipe up in the comments going, yeah, there's a way to do it. It's like this.
Okay, they're welcome to do that.
Yeah, I will scoff at them.
Thanks, Brian. Any other thoughts?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Naomi, I'm sorry that you didn't get to add your thoughts earlier. Is there anything else you might like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was probably covered already. But when we were talking about like, well, how do you open the door for grace and how do you like attract it? The thing that came to my mind was like, if we take God outside of the like religious context and just kind of go into that like world of like manifesting the secret kind of thing, is like what qualities are you embodying to invite the guest that you want to come into your home? And that made me think of like the 99 attributes of God, or like the 99 names of God, and like those are worthwhile character traits to embody. And that was just like, yeah, be a good guest if you want to have a guest into your home, kind of.
Thank you, Naomi. Yeah. Zach, what about you?
See grace as this thing that can basically go parallel with time. And so in the past, when we observe grace, it is gratitude. And I think in the present, when we observe grace, it is the ultimate forms of mindfulness. But then when we try to observe grace in the future, we tend to create an expectation of grace.
Mm.
So grace starts to have this weird quantum behavior. It's like it just pops up, kind of like soap bubbles or jello. Like if you try to catch it, it's gonna slip away. I feel like there is a inverse correlation between grace and expecting grace. And so, like if we stick to the present and the past and what we know as grace, that is basically like how to act as a good guest.
Food for thought. Yeah, Khalil and Osama gave you hearts for that when they liked that. Thank you, Zach. We have someone new, and I would love to give them the opportunity to speak if they might like to. I'm not sure how to pronounce your
Tatang.
name. Tatang? Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes. Yes, quite correct.
Great. So, do you have anything you might like to share before we wrap up? First of all, welcome, by the way.
Thank you for the invitation and just following through the conversation and enjoy it. And for this topic, I think just to reconnect to my own language of gratitude. In Indonesia, we call it like Musak told us, terima kasih. So I think to say terima kasih, it means that I received something that I think useful or beneficial for me, because someone give me that fits with my own development. So for the first time joining this, my comment is to say terima kasih.
Thank you.
Yeah. What part of Indonesia are you from?
Java.
Ah, I thought you have that West Javanese accent.
Yes. Yeah.
It's great to have you here. Yeah.
We have another good friend who is he's from Bogor. And
yeah. Actually, I live near Bogor.
Ah, Who knows? Maybe the two of you will bump into each other one day.
Maybe. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks. All right. So, that's all I got this evening. What about you, Mushtaq?
That's pretty much it. I feel like I could talk on this for another 2 hours and still not say exactly what I want to say about it.
Yeah.
But I am grateful that all of you have taken the patience, the sabur, to listen to me for the last hour and a half.
And made some really wonderful contributions yourselves. And I know for me, as I walk away from this, I really am feeling this thread around it being a state rather than some kind of angling behavior or like language thing. So that gives me like a touchstone from which I can, as Osama was saying, kind of meditate on this and feel it out and sense for all of those connected concepts around perhaps mercy and connection and all of these wonderful words we've been using in non-English words that really offer more nuance than just one language alone. So thank you, everyone, for your offerings. I am in a state of gratitude towards you all.
Oh, and trust us, we always are, because before we start, the conversation goes, what do we do if nobody shows up?
Yeah, I mean,
And then everybody shows up, and we are filled with gratitude for you being there, so we don't have to be embarrassed that nobody showed up.
well, it's an instance of grace, right?
Yes.
We can't make you guys show up, and yet magically
You do.
we meet you here, and then you guys meet us at that point where we can do no more. So it's nice. Thanks. All right, everyone. Guess we can wrap up for this evening. We can
Switch over to Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch mode.
Brady Bunch
Yeah.
mode.
So we can wave to each other and wave to everybody watching
And
graciously on the replay.
we will
And
see you all next week.
see you next week.